So let's take a look at Wheelock chapter 20. We're going to look at fourth declension nouns and then a couple of ablative case uses. So let's start with fourth declension. We have learned three declension patterns already. And so here we are introduced to the fourth one, known as the fourth declension. Thankfully, it's not as common as the other three, but there are some nouns and some important nouns that use it. Let me just remind you with a chart here, with a quick summary of the sorts of declension patterns that we've seen, and we're going to add the fourth to this chart. And I want to just remind you of the typical gender that you find with these declension patterns. The typical gender doesn't mean that there aren't some that are not going to follow this, but this is typical. And then also want to remind you what the stem the noun stem or noun base ending is when those case endings are added. So we'll begin with first declension. These are typically feminine. You might recall there are some masculine first declensions that refer to agency, sort of like professions, poeta, poet, nauta, sailor. But these typically have a noun stem ending with a, and then the case endings added to that. Second declension are usually masculine and neuter, and their stem vowel, the noun stem or base, ends with an O, but that O often weakens to a U, many of the forms, but you will see the O showing up on occasion as well. Third declension nouns typically are going to have stems that end with consonants, or we have I stems as well. And these cover all genders, so masculine, feminine, and neuter. And what's difficult about these is you can't always tell what the gender is by looking at the nominative singular lexical form. You have to learn the gender on a case-by-case basis in many situations. And then what's new for us is fourth declension. These are typically masculine, and their stem vowel is a U. So we're going to see U's throughout most of the forms. So let's make a few comments and then look at the forms themselves. The stem vowel U occurs in all forms except the dative and ablative plural, where we have ibis. So instead of ubis, we have ibis. The U has weakened to an I in the form ibis. But, and this is important, you can sometimes see the U appearing in the genitive plural. So you can see ubis instead of ibis as well. All right, but generally ibis is what we're going to see, and that's good because that's something we've already learned in our third declension patterns. Now, there aren't many fourth declension nouns, as we've mentioned, but when we do find them, they are usually masculine. In our lesson, there is one feminine that we find, manus and manus, which is hand, and then only two neuter nouns, cornu and cornus, horn, and genu and genus, knee. Aside from those, all of the fourth declension nouns we will see in our vocab list are masculine. So look below here and let's look at the forms. And I do want to mention over here that I've provided some other nouns that end with us, but not in the fourth declension. Second declension has nouns that end with us, and third declension, there are some nouns that end with us in a lexical form. We need to be very careful here so that we don't confuse the declension patterns here. So now we have fourth declension nouns that could also end in us, but the pattern is different once we actually look at the rest of the case endings. So let's read these, and you can repeat after me. All right. So fructus, which is fruit, that's nominative singular. Fructus, so of fruit. Fructui, in fruit. Fructum, fruit, and fructu is by fruit or from fruit. So these are singular case endings in fourth declension. And then on the plural side, fructus, fructuum, fructibus, fructus, and fructibus. All right, so what do we notice here? I've given you the masculine and feminine case endings. Those both use the same ones as the masculine that we see here. So notice that we have us, us, ui, and u. on the singular side. Some of these are going to be familiar to you from your third declension case endings. For example, the E here that you see, that looks like the third declension dative singular. Also, we have in third declension the EM, but you've seen that M there. We also see that in first and second declension nouns as well. So hopefully, if you're remembering that these fourth declension nouns have a U stem, then just adding the M is a fairly common accusative singular form. This here is not very predictable, so we have to just learn that. And then over here on the plural side, we have us, uh, So we've got the U's here, except for remember the ibis forms. There's always a U, so there's an S here. Now this looks just like the genitive singular, so we have to watch out. That's ambiguous. And notice that the accusative plural and the nominative plural look the same here. Now, what I want you to remember is this. There's some ways in which this pattern is similar to the second declension forms in the behavior, and also similar to the third declension forms in their behavior. So let me go up to amicus here just to compare now. Remember the form us, when it's second declension masculine, has a genitive singular that ends with a long I, amici, amicus, amici. That's very different from fructus, fructus, right? This is why it's really important to pay attention to the genitive singular form that is always going to accompany your lexical form when you get a new vocab word. But now notice here, in second declension, O and O are identical in dative and ablative. Not so much here, right? We have E and U, so we have to be careful for that. We have the endings here, though that looks sort of similar. But what I want to point out to you here is that the genitive singular amici happens to be exactly the same as the nominative plural amici. And my point here is not that fructus has the long I in both, but I just want you to see that the genitive singular of the fourth declension, fructus, matches the nominative plural of the fourth declension, just like amici does. All right? That's the only thing I want to point out, is that they actually happen to be the same, just like these happen to be the same. Okay? So we have similarity there. Now I also want to point out that for third declension masculine nouns, if you remember, I'll just put third D here and masculine. We have ace for nominative plural, and then for accusative plural, it's also ace, right? Remember that? And so the nominative and the masculine and feminine plural and the accusative masculine, feminine, plural, third declensions are identical to each other. And over here, we have the forms in the nominative and masculine and feminine plural matching the accusative masculine and feminine plural too. All right. So this matching the genitive singular is like second declension masculine behavior. This matching nominative plural matching the accusative plural is like third declension behavior. And then, of course, you're familiar with in third declension, we have ibis and ibis as well. Okay, so and then is also standard fare for third declension genitive. So a lot of similarities here with third declension. All right, now let's look at the neuter form here. So cornu is horn. So let's you can repeat after me. Cornu, cornus, cornu, 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 cornua, cornuum, cornibus, cornua, cornibus. All right. So I want you to notice something very interesting here about the neuter pattern. There is a long U in every singular form. Macron, every form has a macron. And then notice that in the neuter plural, nothing's long. No long vowels here. So maybe that'll help you. Macrons everywhere, macrons missing everywhere in the plural. All right? Now, so here's something else to notice, of course, that it's long U in every form except for the genitive singular. And since the genitive singular we've already learned over here is us, we can predictably expect the neuter to have the same one. So these two match each other in those forms, and then they're the same, thankfully. What's the same is the first form you learn, the lexical form. So that ending on the lexical form gets applied 4 other times in the singulars. It's only the genitive singular that's different. So that's good from the standpoint of not having to memorize more case endings. It's bad from the standpoint that you can't tell what case it is. There's 4 possibilities when you see the long U by itself. Now on the plurals, here, all of them have the U except for the I of ibus. Okay, so everyone has a U. Is normal genitive plural from what we've learned with third declension, so that's predictable. And then look at this. These A's are predictable. And then, of course, the ibus is a predictable, just like third declension. So we also saw these A's and third declension nominative and accusative neuter plural as well. So these are very familiar endings. You should be able to identify these when you see them, as long as you know that you're dealing with a neuter noun. Okay. Over here, I've already talked about the amicus form, but here's another us noun, but this one's a third declension neuter noun, corpus. And notice that the genitive is corporis. And so that is ending here is what tells us that that's a third declension noun. So if I have us, but a genitive in E, it's second declension masculine. If I have us, but with is as my genitive singular, that's a third declension neuter noun. And then if I have us followed by us with a long U for the genitive singular, then that is a fourth declension noun, and it's going to follow this new pattern. All right, so hopefully that helps. Well, a couple of other things that I want to point out here that I want you to remember. There's 5 places where a US comes at the end. 5 places. But the U is short in only one place. The nominative feminine singular everywhere else, there is a macron in the U with the U. Okay, so here I want to just look at the case endings. When I highlight here, I'll highlight in blue all the places where we have US. Okay, there's 4 in the masculine feminine column, and then we have this 1 in the neuter column for genitive singular. So there's 5 forms, right? All of them have the macron except for this one. Okay, so that's the one that's unusual, and that's the nominative masculine feminine. All right, first form, short, everywhere else, US has a long U. Now, secondly, in order to keep from getting confused by the fact that some nouns with lexical forms ending in us follow other declension patterns beside the fourth declension, you must, absolutely must continue to learn the genitive singular form along with the nominative singular lexical form when you're memorizing your vocabulary words, okay? So, servus, servi, right? Here's that long I for the genitive. That tells you that this is a second declension masculine noun. Tempus, temporis, this is ending here, that tells you it's a third declension noun, right? Third declension genitive singular is. And then manus, manus, which is the word for hand, that's fourth declension because we've got this us ending here for the genitive form. All right, now for the rest of the lesson, we're just talking about ablatives. And actually, some of this is already familiar to you. There are 2 ablative uses that Wheelock describes as the ablative of place from which and the ablative of separation. Okay, so for the ablative of place from which, what we have here is a verb of motion. This is really important. The verb inherently has to have some motion involved in it. So we have a verb of motion, and we can express movement from a place using the ablative form of the place noun with the prepositions a or ab, de, and x. Okay, so a or ab from, de down from, x away from. So I've shortened a couple of the examples from the Wheelock chapter, but I do want to just talk through what's here. So graiki navigaverunt is the subject and verb. All right, so the Greeks sailed. And then I have this prepositional phrase, a patria sua. So here's my preposition a from ab, right? And these all of these prepositions take ablative case. So sailed is a verb of motion from the country their own. So from their own country. Remember, this is a reflexive uh, form here. So verb of motion plus the ablative of place from which, the place from which they did this action, sailed. And then in the second sentence, flumen is a neuter noun subject, and fluxit is the verb. So the river flowed, and then de montibus. Mons is a new noun for us in this chapter. It means mountain. This is the ibus plural ablative case ending here. So de montibus means down from. Flowing inherently involves motion down from the mountains. All right, so that's ablative of place from which, and this will usually, happen with these prepositions. Now, with the ablative of separation, this is used to express that someone or something is separate from another, but without motion involved. The thing or person that the one is separate from is an ablative case and can frequently occur without a preposition, especially with verbs like to free, to lack, and to deprive. And we'll learn verbs like this in our chapter vocabulary. So let's look at these three examples here. Cicero hostes ab urbe prohibuit. Cicero, I always want to say Caesar when I see Cicero. I don't know why. And there's my verb. Cicero kept hostes. That ascending could be a nominative or accusative plural in third declension. But here, since Cicero is the subject, this is going to be the direct object. So Cicero kept the enemy ab urbe, from the city. All right, so kept the enemy away from the city. Notice that prohibiting is not inherently a verb of motion, right? But there is separation on the basis of this verbal activity. In the second one, I have eos, which is actually an accusative masculine plural pronoun, third person. Liberavit is one of our newer verbs. He, the subject is the inflection he, third singular on this perfect active indicative form. He freed eos, them. So eos liberavit, he freed them. And then timore is an ablative noun. Notice there's no preposition used here with this one. We had a preposition here, but we could use the ablative without a preposition. He freed them from fear. You have to add the word from here with your ablative noun, with this sort of ablative of separation. And then our third example, agricolae pecunia saepe carrebant. The farmers, subject, agricolae, carrebant is the imperfect. And then we have, so that's the verb. The futures were lacking, saepe often. And then pecunia is ablative. You can see that ablative feminine singular ending there, right? And here we don't add from. And the reason we don't is because to lack, the verb to lack, we don't say to lack from. We don't even say to lack of, right? But the idea here is that the lack involves a privation of, or the idea of being separated from possessing money, and so you'll see the ablative used for this sort of expression as well. So what you lack or have want of is in the ablative case, pecunia in this situation. All right, so those are a couple of ablative uses that you need to be keeping in mind as you read your Latin text.